In the quantum field of potential, we are not bound by our perception. We're not bound by identity. We're not fixed into one potential. And so everything is open. All possibilities are equally accessible.
Biggest life hack that I found around the ability to shift out of a quote unquote negative emotion into a positive one is realizing you can't feel bad about something you don't care about.
Yeah.
And so every single time you feel any level of bad, shame, guilt, blame, anger, whatever, it's a simultaneous moment of being able to realize how much you care.
Right. And if you look at it like a painter, right, you can paint onto the canvas, but the canvas is actually blank. We're actually always existing in a clean slate. Mm-hmm. Just because if we start thinking, oh no, this moment's not a clean slate, then now we're painting that thought onto the canvas, and then we're experiencing that it's not a clean slate.
Mr. Oren Harris, thank you for joining me on the creative path.
Yeah, man. I'm stoked to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. When I was coming up with this new ethos of my podcast, right? Switching over from the deep dive, which was very broad and really just, I wanted to be able to go wherever I wanted it to go. When it became about creativity, you immediately popped into my head and I went, okay, Oren Harris, I gotta get you on here. You're someone who, where you and I vibe so much is I think that the quantum approach to creativity is something that we share. And so
100%. I
want to start there, which is, why don't you let people know how you relate to creativity, specifically with this quantum view?
I relate to creativity as life itself. It's like the flow of life. And where creativity is really quantum is just like the leading edge of the moment, the leading edge of life. Whatever is most alive in the moment is kind of like where the stream of creativity is unfolding. You know, whether that's being connected to as a deep truth of the moment, right? Or something that's inspired, or something that's repressed or expressed, just that actual tension point, right, is the point of life unfolding or emerging. And to me, that's also when we're courageous enough, crazy enough, willing to meet at that point, things become very quantum.
And so I've had conversations with you where we've talked about some of the ways that we approach creativity and learning. And one of them is like Neo in the Matrix, where we just go, I'm just going to go into the quantum field.
Right.
I'm going to download the codes and come out and say, I know Kung Fu.
Yeah.
And so that to me, I've done, especially in medicine ceremonies, but it is an approach that I have where even, Gerard Adams.
Yeah.
And so Gerard, I was in Mexico, and I've never been kite surfing. And I just said, I want to go kite surfing. And they went, well, the first one, you have to do this whole thing. And they take you, and I went, yeah, but I'll crush that. I'll be like up on the board in no time. And they went, well, I mean, you have to. And I said, no, you don't understand.
You don't understand.
I'm going to be able to do it really quickly. And Gerard goes, but you think that about everything. And I said, yes.
Oh, you're right.
100%. I think that about everything. I have a belief that I will be good at anything I intentionally choose to put my mind at. And that really supports me in approaching it through a space of possibility of what I can, as opposed to limitation of what I can't. And you're someone who takes that even, I think, probably to a whole nother level. Do you think that's accurate to say? Do you know anyone who has that belief as strongly as you?
Aside from yourself? That's a great question. I've never thought about that. But my hesitation is leading me to say no.
It's either me or you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so where did you get that? Did you always grow up believing you could do anything? Did that come from your parents? Where is that from?
I think that, many things contributed to that. One thing I will attribute to my mom is she allowed me to remain curious. Like, kids were just naturally curious in that state of innocence and asking and questioning and why? Okay, but why? Okay, but why? even to the point when I would like, annoy other family members, and they're like, you need to kind of keep little O in check here. She just allowed me to remain curious. And so I think that's one key factor as I look back in hindsight to what allows me to stay connected to the field of possibility. Because when we're in a curious mindset, then our field is open. We haven't fixed ourselves into a perception or into a box. And so the field is completely open.
And so when you say the field, for people who are hearing
the field.
Right now,
What is this mysterious
what is this
field?
field that you're actually talking about?
The field of potential, some call it the quantum field. It's where like creation is happening in real time, right? And so, I think about doing something, which one of the craziest stories to me is in terms of just jumping into something and doing it, was doing a backflip for the first time. And in the quantum field of potential, we are not bound by our perception. We're not bound by identity. We're not fixed into one potential. And so everything is open. All possibilities are equally accessible. And so that's what I mean by the field. I don't know if that lands it a little bit more.
Yeah, I had a podcast with Peter Crone where he refers to it as the canvas, right? Like this just blank space that everything actually is, and any limitation that you imagine or what you think reality is just like a circle within this massive canvas.
Right. I like the canvas analogy because like, a canvas is blank, right? And if you look at it like a painter, right, you can paint onto the canvas, but the canvas is actually blank. We are actually always existing in a clean slate. Just because if we start thinking, oh no, this moment's not a clean slate, then now we're painting that thought onto the canvas, and then we're experiencing that it's not a clean slate.
Well, then how do you relate to the past that you've experienced and bringing it to this present moment? Because in many ways, for example, me saying that I can kite surf very easily or whatever it might be that I could do is also reinforced by a past that I'm bringing with me of having been able to do a lot of different things more easily than a lot of other people or what other people think of me. And so I am projecting at least what people would see. That's a positive thing to project, but I'm still bringing the past with me.
Yeah, in that example, you're remembering a past experience, and essentially you've created a neural network in your brain of like that is now become part of your expectation because become part of your person, your identity. You're like, oh yeah, I don't just understand that and want it to be true. I've experienced that as being true, right? And so you can have an experience in purely in the quantum field, like in a state of pure creation, pure innocence, for whatever reason that led you to this demonstration. Let's say you did skateboarding for the first time. You'd never done it before, and you had the inspiration to hop on a skateboard, and you hop on the skateboard and you just like nail it, right? You're having that experience. So you're having an energetic, emotional, visceral experience of that. But then now you can start to make associations with it. Like, oh, whatever the association is, I'm lucky, or that's just how it happens for me. And then if you have another experience of that, so in that sense, you're bringing a positive projection from the past. And here's where I think it gets interesting is that because information is frequency, then technically, and this is like on that Neo shit, right? You could remember something that you hadn't done before, right? Because it's energy and information. And in the example of carrying forth a past of like, oh, I know, I just set my mind to something and I do it and I do it and I do it. That just becomes part of your identity. But technically, you could tune into the frequency of something and essentially download or upload that information or that memory into your body, into your muscle memory.
And so do you have a specific process by which you do that?
I do. It's pretty refined at the moment. So I'm happy to like unpack it and kind of see like what the building blocks of it are.
Yeah, I mean, you're on the creative
I'm
path.
on the creative path.
Take us on the path. So you say, okay, I want to backflip. That's something that I've just decided that I want to do. You have the belief I can go into the quantum and just know how to do that.
Right.
And so what is now the process?
Well, in that story, so I went to this intermediate gymnastics class to basically test my flowabilities, right? And I wanted to capture it so my audience could see, because they're like, oh, okay, well, you're great at basketball, you're great at acting, you're great at this. And in case they had the argument of like, yeah, but you've done those things, it's muscle memory, it's repetition, you've become unconsciously competent. I'm like, okay, let me pick something that I have zero experience and I have probably some fear around, right? Especially when it comes to like doing anything going backwards. So I go into this gymnastics class. I didn't even know that a back handspring was part of the class until, we did some like rolls and tumbles and we were doing various things. And I was like, okay, this is fun. I'm having fun. And he said, okay, now we're going to do back handsprings. And in that moment that he said that, the memory of the trepidation of going backwards, whether it's off of a diving board or just trying to go backwards, period, hit my body, right? And so this is my identity now. Identity just meaning like that's how I relate to going backwards.
Unconsciously. That's what you've just accepted as part of your reality without knowing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that came to the forefront because I'm like 4 people back in line to go do this backflip. And so it was like, oh shit, right? That was the feeling and the thought. Then my very next thought was like, it's game time, baby. This is the moment, right? And so in this part, I'm going to do my best to like get into the nuances of, because that's where like the gold is.
Because I'm going to ask you.
Because you're going to ask me.
You better bring it, bro.
So I basically collapsed the tension, right? And I did that in a couple of ways. And by tension, it's the tension of my memory, right? It activated my body. It started populating my mind. Like, that's not me. I've never done a backflip. I'm scared of doing that. That's disorienting. And so I met that with no resistance. And this all happened very fast because I've also practiced this so much. I was like, okay, fully accept that. And then I immediately, right after that, like 10 seconds later, was like, started tuning into truth, or what I feel like is truth. I'm like, well, that's just memory. It's just energy that's being triggered in my brain and in my body. It's not who I am. So that's just one pathway in the quantum field.
So how do you release it? So because you just basically went, yeah. So I tuned into this, I felt it, and then I released it. I'm just gonna swipe right on that. Well, how did you actually do that? Was it a breathing technique? Was it something that you?
And this is where the unpacking is, because it was very refined in that moment. Probably physiologically,
it's an exhale.
It was an exhale, like just a surrender to the moment, not using any energy to try to fight the memory, but also not using any energy to fight the possibility.
So how would someone practice? Because what you're saying, I've done in moments, and then there's moments I can't, or I believe I can't, or I cannot seem to get to that space where I go. I remember I was in a boga ceremony recently, and I was going, I just want to let it go, let it go. And then I was sitting there thinking, laying there, I mean, I'm deep in medicine going, how do I let it go? Like, how do I actually do that? And I think there's so many people right now that are going, yeah, Oren Harris. Right. I have that moment where I realize there's fear. I can feel it in my body and I want to let it go, but it's not going anywhere. So help us more. Is there any way that either you are aware that you can say it's this for me, this is my process, or is there a way that someone who could at least start?
Yeah, we'll keep unpacking this and maybe kind of bookmark the backflip story, because that's more on the superhero side, like super refined. I literally was just like, I'm going to like
don't worry, I'm not going to lose it. I'll bring you back to the story.
Bookmark.
We're at the point where you're releasing the identity that you've had in order to create a new reality for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. So there's many ways that I approach this. One of them I already started to mention, which is the energy of acceptance, right? Acceptance is not positive or negative. It's just like surrendering to what it is that I'm feeling, not judging what I'm feeling, not trying to change it. That's one avenue, is acceptance, right? Another one is, and this is usually enhanced if I have some level of acceptance, then I might start to decode it. But the key is when I'm in acceptance and I'm not judging how I'm feeling, I'm not judging myself, or I'm judging myself less, then I have more space to investigate the nature of the tension.
Got it.
Right? Like what is the glue that's holding this identity together, that's holding this belief or perception or story in place, right?
Because you've removed yourself from it. I'm a big fan of IFS. I don't know if you're familiar with internal family systems, but parts work. And there's a blending that happens with our parts where we think, wow, I'm afraid, and you think that's you.
Right.
But in actuality, you can separate that and look at it from over here and look at that part of yourself that was just contracting at going backwards and say, I see you. You exist. Awesome. You're not me. You're a part of me, or you've been living in me, and I see you now. And that level of acceptance, in my experience, is exactly the place you need to get to first before you can shift anything.
100%. Yeah. So love and acceptance creates space to then see more clearly like what it is. And I tend to get very intimate with feeling and with any fear, or like how, like why is it that I'm defining myself or the situation in this way? You know, what is it that I'm going after? And usually it's some form of safety when we really get to the core.
Like you're afraid of being hurt in this backflip.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, in the backflip example would be, yes, afraid of being hurt. But like in a relational example, it might be a fear of, like I've said this before, all fear is a fear of feeling. So I identify like, what is the core feeling? And if you keep descending down the emotional soup, you'll usually get to a core feeling, and it might be something like shame, right? And once I identify, oh, it's the vibration, the frequency, the energy of shame that I'm afraid to feel in my body, in my experience, you know, then I might remind myself that feeling has never killed me. It might be deeply uncomfortable, but it's never killed me. So if I can allow myself to, now, feeling probably has been so overwhelming that some people jump into their mind and go into psychosis and then
kill themselves.
Yeah. So that can happen. But feeling itself has never killed me, even if it feels like, oh, I'm gonna explode, I'm gonna die right now.
Do you want to know what all the Creative Path podcast guests have in common? They have found a way to monetize their creativity. They have found a way to earn a living doing something that they love, where they are rewarded for the uniqueness of them. And that is a key pillar to living a joyful and fulfilled life. You have to earn a living doing something that you enjoy. And so if you are an artist, a creative, an entrepreneur, a coach who is wanting to scale your impact and scale your income through your unique creative expression, then I want to invite you to check out the description of this video so that you can find a link to my blueprint that I have used to generate hundreds of millions of views on my content and millions of dollars in revenue. This will give you a clear step-by-step understanding of how you can do exactly the same. All right, back to the show.
And so then you identify the deepest root of the feeling that you can get to.
Right.
Because there may be more layers, but wherever you're at in your journey of consciousness, you can get to a certain layer. And this is where it's very helpful to have a coach or a
100%.
therapist, because they can often see layers that you may not be aware of. And then you get to that, and you through the acceptance, the love of it, you're able to at least see it, and the seeing it releases the stranglehold, because it's actually the resistance that's been holding it.
Exactly. And that's what the energy of love, the energy of acceptance, it releases the tension around the feeling. So there's already a feeling there underneath the surface, and I'm getting to the feeling, and it's not so much the feeling that debilitates us. It's the fear of the feeling.
Right. And so then in that moment, you're now also entering into the next stage of this process, which is you have to find something else to replace it.
Right.
If you just identify it and then just continue on your way, you're going to still live in there, or it's going to be the path that is still your default. So you now are going into a different feeling, and that's very conscious on your part. Going back to the backflip, the next step of that.
Yeah, and with that, I would say that one of the ways I access a different feeling is through truth, or what feels like truth to me. So for example, if I go down the layers and the deep feeling is like shame, like I took a lady through a process one time. She was like, I'm afraid of failing if I start this new business. And we kept going lower and lower, getting more and more intimate with feeling, more and more intimate with what the actual fear was. And it wasn't the business failing. It wasn't not making enough money. It wasn't not being able to feed her kids. It wasn't any of that. At the end of that tunnel, it was like the moment where people close to her are like, she has to face them and be like, I let you guys down. The vision didn't work, right? And the feeling there was shame, right? So she was afraid of feeling shame. So using that as an example to replace it with something else, it's like, what is actually a deeper truth there, right? And in her case, it was really what you're imagining as this unbearable moment of shame and judgment could be replaced with intimacy, and like the people who really care about you and in all likelihood would be rooting for you and would feel relieved and connected to you. So what's hidden inside of the shame is intimacy. And maybe once you go past shame, it's like there's the vulnerability, right? Emotional transparent. And then you get down to just an intimate moment of just like, this was my experience. And then so what happened, like in that example, she released the fear of shame that she was calling the fear of failure. And in the process, she also shifted her identity on some level, right? Because she was identifying with, well, I'm a visionary, for example, or people know that when I say I'm going to do something, I succeed, right? And that's what also starts to shape the identity, if that makes sense, right? And the emotions surrounding the identity, which I think that's the glue that often holds the identity, the perception, the belief in place. And so, feeling the shame, the thing that we're afraid of feeling, then allows the identity to expand to be like, oh, I'm just as worthy and valuable and powerful in this example because I went for the business in the first place. I'm still a source of inspiration. I'm not being perceived now like I'm letting people down. So replacing it with a deeper
cut.
Yeah.
For me, I mean, I love what you just outlined, and there were two pieces that I wanted to highlight. One is just the biggest life hack that I found around the ability to shift out of a quote unquote negative emotion into a positive one is realizing you can't feel bad about something you don't care about. Right. Yeah. And so every single time you feel any level of bad, shame, guilt, blame, anger, whatever, it's an simultaneous moment of being able to realize how much you care.
Right.
And so even if that's the step, just one step, you move out of shame into I really care.
Right.
That alone will change the physiology, neurology, the entire frequency of your being in that moment and start to allow you to open up to new possibilities. And so like that one belief mindset hack, I think if people can take that away and always remember it in those moments was huge for me.
Yeah. And it opens up care, it opens up love, and it opens up your channel. So now you're not using your creativity, your creative power to suppress a feeling, to control a feeling because you have some idea about it, right? So it unleashes creative power, and then you have that to your disposal to express it, to direct it.
And so let's go back to the backflip example. So you freed up this creative energy that had been holding it in place, which is a huge theme, by the way, of everyone I've talked to about creativity. It's actually about getting the stuff out of the way.
100%.
Freeing up your natural creative life force. So you freed it up. You felt that identity. You released that identity. And now you are going into what?
So now I'm going back to my superhero power that we all had when we were children. And it's our ability to learn at quantum speed. Learn through permeation, learn through absorption, learn through observation, learn through frequency, essentially. That's why children, before they learn judgment or fear, could learn several languages because they don't have an idea about how many languages they can learn or how hard it's to learn. So now they're just purely in the creative process and being guided by their inspiration towards something. And so in that moment, we'll call it step 3, then I was able to feel I literally started watching people who were doing it, and I wasn't watching with my brain to be like, oh, they lean this way 45 degrees, and then they I could see, oh, and they use their calves, oh, they jump straight. I wasn't doing that. I was like absorbing, what does it feel like to do the backflip, right? And not even just asking that as an intellectual question, but letting myself feel how they're feeling.
I mean, we have mirror neurons, right? We have the ability to learn through osmosis of just being around other people's field of excellence or knowledge or wisdom, for sure.
Right, and when someone has embodied knowledge or wisdom and it's embodied in their being, then it's like a living transmission. And if we're open enough, if we're available to it, we can start to download the frequency of feeling. It is information. It's not just feeling, it's information. It's like, oh, that's what it feels like. What does it feel like for Adam Roa to decide he's going to go into the studio and start making music?
Painful. That's the answer. It's always painful.
Well, there's the painful part. So I maybe I won't download that from you. But what I will take is your insane belief that you could just do that.
Yeah.
In the area of music. You see what I'm saying?
To me, it's not even crazy. Like, I get that reflection all the time from people.
I don't think it's crazy.
They go, wait, you've done what? You've done this and this and this and this. And I went, yeah, because it just in the moment felt as if that was the right thing to do.
Right. And I do think that is a skill or something that has been developed, as we said earlier. And the part that I'm pointing to right now is it's actually innate. It's innocence. It's like a baby learning to walk, trial and error, experimentation, tripping, falling, crawling. Like they're in a more direct creative process because as they trip and fall, they're not like, oh my God, I'm embarrassed. I should be able to walk by now. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And because that, judgment or internal critic that is making some sort of self-worth judgment is not there, you're able to learn faster. So with the backflip, when I was watching like a baby. If you could have seen my eyes, I probably looked like a baby almost, just like like maybe not a baby, like, but like wide-eyed, just like purely feeling, right?
Mm-hmm. Back to the curiosity that you mentioned.
Yeah.
At the beginning. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so that's the next stage of the process is now that I've created some space inside myself and anything becomes possible again, I was feeling how it felt when people were going through the process. And then when it came, like 3 people were in front of me in line, right? So I was able to download a lot of information because I created a lot of space. And then when it was my turn, we got up there, I was waiting for the guy to give me some like instructions, give me some tips, you know what I mean? Tell me something. He's like, all right, let's go. And for a second there, I went back into time, right? Of like, oh, but I need instruction. And then I recognized, I was like, oh, let that go. So I fumbled around for a second. I was like, so should I jump up? Should I jump back? And he was like, just do it. And I looked at him and I felt his certainty and I took a deep breath.
Which was really, 18 different parts that we just talked about.
Exactly.
In that moment.
Exactly.
Yes, totally.
18 different parts.
In one exhale.
In one exhale happening. Because I recognized that was how I was being directed in the moment. Mm-hmm. Right. And disclaimer, especially with physical things of this nature, do not try this at home. I also am humble in the sense of I'm not overly spiritual in moments like that. I both disrespect my limitations And I'm intelligent enough to respect my limitations, meaning in that moment, if I was not able to actually be like, fuck it and let go and continue to follow the impulse of my intuition, of an inner knowing, the knowing that I can do this, right? Then I probably would not have done it. I think that would be ignorant. And that's where that doesn't feel like a limitation to me. It just feels like it's smart. But in that moment, the deep breath took me back purely into present time. And so then I was like kind of flexing my legs like this. You know, I was visualizing a little bit just from what I'd seen. I'm seeing gymnasts my whole life, right? And but I wasn't thinking like, how am I going to do that? And
You're Simone Biles in your mind. You got it.
Yeah. Exactly. And then I leapt backwards and I landed. And then the second time we did it, and he spotted me. The second time we did it, he stepped away. He's like, okay, go again.
No, this is a back handspring or this is a back flip?
Well, it was a back handspring, but what happened was I almost did a backflip and I recognized that. And then the second time we did it, he stepped away and I was like, wait a minute, I'm the guy in the class who knows the least. Like, where are you going? But the same moment happened as he looked at me and said, you got it. And I was like, you're right, I got it. And then I had that. So that was my third time being in this quantum process of releasing. I was like, okay, that feels true. And so then I did it by myself and I realized I almost did a backflip. And then I asked him, I said, can I do a backflip? And he's like, well, we weren't going to do that in this class, but he's like, you can. And so he took me aside afterward and he said, you want to go up? And he showed me. I said, can you show it to me? And I was already still in this state of like
I'm in the
Neo
field
in the
right
Matrix.
Now, your eyes are rolled back in your head. You're like, just show it to me.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he showed it to me and I felt it. And he literally stood there and he just like put his two fingers on the base of my back. And I kind of was just like, I was like, okay, up. And I'm telling you, if I would have gone into my mind at all, I would have completely been in time in terms of needing to understand muscle memory and physics and like how high I didn't. And I leapt up backwards, landed on my feet. I was like, awesome, done.
Never even have to do it again. Now I just know.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I wound up doing it again like a few months later and then a couple years later just to like double check myself. I was like, okay, just see if I
want to know something crazy you probably don't know about me. So I was a lifeguard growing up in Arizona at public pools, and on our breaks or before the pool opened, we would always screw around on the high dive and the diving board, just a bunch of lifeguards, right? And one year we just thought, wouldn't it be cool if we actually knew what we were doing? And so we all joined the dive team. So I spent a year in high school on the dive team learning how to do legitimate, like my best dive was a back and a half twist. So standing backwards on the board, 1.5 backwards with a half twist so you enter forward. And so, the learning how to backflip on dry land was a part of learning how to be able to flip on all those things. And so I know the process that you're talking about, and something that I've actually adopted for myself recently is a new kind of insight, which is I think that the limits of how good we can get at something are based on how afraid of being hurt we are.
Yeah, I agree.
We will get better at anything in life
I agree.
if we're not afraid of being hurt. And that includes loving. And that's what I was connecting it to when I had that come through was if you're willing to get hurt, love opens up doors and potentials and possibilities that just are not available to the people who are scared to get hurt. Yeah. And the same thing is true for skateboarding or snowboarding. When I go down, I can feel those moments where I tense up and get scared. I'm going down the mountain on my snowboard, and I know that I could go faster or I could be looser or whatever, but I hit that fear moment and it tenses me up and I slow down. And I'm going, if I wasn't scared of getting hurt, I would be crushing this mountain right now.
That's a great point. I imagine like some, people like Laird Hamilton are like extreme in that way when it comes to physical things of like embracing getting hurt, right? And what sparked when you said that is I've actually approached that like intentionally leaned in once I realized the fear of getting hurt or the fear of feeling something. I've definitely been through seasons of my life where I'm like, my intuition was like, oh, okay, I need to lean into this because I want to liberate myself from that fear. And so intentionally leaning into it. Live streams are a great example. One of the reasons that I can, speak and flow, whether I'm on a live stream or on a podcast like right now or on stage, is...
You mean you're not reading from the teleprompter?
Yeah.
Bro, have you been going off script? What the hell?
I actually had an interviewer reading from a teleprompter. That's another story recently. It was crazy. Anyway, getting on live streams for the first time and sharing something of myself, something of value to my audience, to inspire, to motivate, to be of service. Essentially, one of the things that I recognized early on was wherever I would tense up. And instead of trying to master my craft, which I'm, is just the impulse of spirit, but I recognized where I was trying to come to a space of mastery also to avoid the pain. The pain would be like the moment you mess up, the moment like I'm not a good speaker. And I intentionally went after that to release the tension of feeling like I'm a bad speaker, I'm a bad coach, I'm not valuable, I messed up. And live stream was a great place to do that because you can't edit, you can't say stop. And so I did that early on to burn through, like intentionally to burn through all these layers of resistance and self-critic and self-judgment. And that's why that contributed to my ability to stay in my creative channel, because being on a live stream or being on stage or channeling a poem, the channel part, the openness, like the receptivity, the actual creative process is really the same.
So that leads me to kind of a transition point here, which is the creativity and the everything you've been talking about and how that applies to business and
Yes.
what you've been building
Yes.
and what you've been, and the various different aspects that I've seen you, the iterations of Oren Harris over the years. And how do you apply this concept that we've been talking about to create externally? Because we've been talking about this internal process, right? But how do you translate that to, I'm going to launch a program, or I'm going to lead a retreat, or whatever it might be?
Such a juicy question. Yeah, so I approach it like art, right? And I prioritize the same things when I'm going to create a program or a course or create a new identity or position for myself in the marketplace. I approach it the same way, essentially. And I create from the inside out. I allow the frequency to inform, right? Even that word information, to come into form. I allow the frequency, like my inner creative director, which is like my intuition, it's spirit, to kind of direct me as I'm bringing something into form. Because the form is like the logistics of it. It's like if I'm creating a container, for example, like an immersion experience with me is an example, right? I pay attention to what's alive in the field.
Back to the field
again.
Yeah.
And I can assess that in many different ways. One is, okay, my highest excitement, my inspiration, right? On a level of service, if I'm doing a VIP immersion, it's not about me, it's about service, right? And it's like I'm bringing my skills, gifts, abilities, and talents in service to this person. Let's say you come and do an immersion with me and your inspiration is, I want to blow up my business in some particular way. So that's easy to just like, I'll create a container, here's the logistics of it. It's a day long. This is what it involves and this is how much it costs, right? But every single detail of that process, the pricing, the container itself, the design of the container, I'm engaging with in the same exact creative process. So one access point, and this is something that's happening in real time right now, I'm creating a new immersion for creatives. And some of what I'm paying attention to in the field is I'm noticing what parts of the creative process, when I'm engaging with people, are lighting me up the most. Where am I feeling the most aliveness? Is it in being in the studio with you, in songwriting, and hashing out ideas? So when I see something like that, that becomes a clue. And then before I just jump in and be like, try to design it and extrapolate it, I put it on the canvas. I'm like, okay, so that's an element, right? I am inspired for whatever reason, and I will find the reasons too, when I sit down with Adam in a setting like this, overlooking the city. Like, this is enlivening my spirit. So I take that to be a clue, right?
Clue that you just need more of me in your life, or
everybody needs some more Adam in their life, right? Yeah.
I am the answer.
And so that's like non-physical, because there's a feeling here. There's an inspiration, there's an aliveness, there's an excitement. And what I'm saying is, then I will take that excitement, and then if I bring my brain in and my strategic thinking and getting into like strategy, plan, and decision or design, then I'm doing so from the frequency. And so I'm always kind of gauging things based on the frequency. So even with price, if I say, oh, it's going to be $10,000, one of the things I'm paying attention to is not just, okay, what makes business sense here, but where do I feel the most aliveness? Is it 10,000, 11,000, 8,000? And I'm gauging, that's like connecting to the creative muse. There's information there, you know, beyond logic. And it's like, oh, 20,000. That lit up. I feel electricity there.
Yeah, I love that you're speaking to that, because I just did this recently with a client who, the moment that a client hires me, they want to raise their rates of whatever it is that they're doing. It's just a thing that happens. And
right.
I think, so she was going through this exact process of going, I want to raise my rates. And I said, great, let's go through the exercise to do that. She said, what do you mean? And I went, well, let's see what you can capacitate. Let's see what you can actually hold. And so for me, when I was starting as a coach, I hired my first coach, and it was $5,000, and I didn't have it. I had to put it on a credit card. So I put the entire thing on a credit card, and I just said, and at the time I was a personal trainer and I was making a certain amount of money, and I went, well, I'm either going to have to take on new clients, which I really don't want to do, which is why I'm hiring this coach and I'm trying to transition out of this. But I just trust I'll figure it out. This will pay for itself. And then when I was building my coaching business, I just felt in my body, I have to charge less than what I paid my coach, because I don't feel I can offer as much value. So I priced mine at $3,333. It was $3,333 for 3 months.
I've been there.
That was it, right? When I first started. And I stayed there for a little bit. And then what I started to do was, every single time I signed a client, I raised my rates. Every single time. And sometimes I went from 3,333 to 3,800, just a little bit. And then I went from 3,800 to 4,500. And then I went from 4,500 to 7,000, because I just had some, right? And then eventually it just kept going up. And sometimes it was really small, and sometimes it was big. And then eventually it hit $1 million, right? When I was paid $1 million for coaching. And the way that I got to that, and this is a piece that resonates so deeply with how you're describing it, is I sat across from Marcy Locke. You know Marcy.
I know Marcy.
So Marcy was known as the $1 Million Mentor, because she had been paid notoriously $1 million for her coaching, and she branded herself as that.
Yes.
And I sat across from her on my old podcast, The Deep Dive, and said, how do you even tell someone with a straight face that it's $1 million to work with you? I can feel in my body the idea of looking at someone and saying it's $1 million to work with me makes me so uncomfortable.
Right.
And and that is a feeling that everyone who's listening to this has a very tangible, whatever it is that you charge right now for what it is that you do. I want you to pick an outlandish number. I want you to pick a number like $1 million for, and if you're charging, 5,000, you pick $1 million and you say, okay, imagine with your imagination telling your next person who actually, not just like a random person, but someone who inquires and says, I'm interested in coaching with you. You have to tell that person it's $1 million to work with you.
Yes.
And feel what that feels like in your body to have to do that. For most of you listening right now, that feeling is a very tangible example of where you are not a match to that level of financial abundance coming to you in that form. And so for me, it bothered me. And when she left, I went, why the fuck? Why can't I say that?
Right. I'm as dope as her.
I went, there's got to be like, what would it take? And that started an inquiry. And within 12 months, I got paid $1 million. And so,
amazing.
And so But it was a moment of recognition that I'm not a match to that. And so for what you're saying, when I was working with my client recently, I said, imagine this number. Can you say that? Can you actually hold that? And she said, no, I can't. And I went, great. Let's say this number. And I went much lower. And she said, yeah, I could. I went, okay. And we went into the middle and she said, no. And we just did that refinement, almost like muscle testing, just energetically to what can you actually capacitate? Because if you set prices that you can't hold, no one's going to pay them. They're going to feel the fact that you don't believe you're worth that. And if you set them too low, you're actually going to feel undervalued when people hire
undernourished.
you. 100%. And you'll burn out from it.
Yeah. And that process that you're describing, the intimacy of that process feels like the creative process, even with my own expansion. And maybe I view it that way because I don't have a lot of judgment on myself. And so I get excited about that. And I do feel like there is an art to being able to read these feelings as they come up, right? And that's where having, the acceptance of whatever I feel is okay to create the space to be able to decode. It's like, okay, right now I'm saying $100,000 and I feel a tension, but even being able to read the tension, is the tension that I'm not aligned with that currently, like my belief or whatever is not up to speed with that, and therefore my work is going to be over here? Or is this one of those moments where I'm overqualified, I actually already am ready to deliver this, it is an alignment, and I'm feeling tension there? But the ability to discern that, to me, feels like art. I'm like, oh, okay. Yeah, I feel some tension here. I did this like a year ago. I had stretched and I just like expanded my prices, and I sat down with one of my clients, and I even did it with him in real time because he's like, this is our last session, right? And it was time to re-up. And I told him just intimately, I said, this is interesting timing because I'm in the process of raising my prices, and like he's a soulmate client. And so I bought him into my process because I was guided to do that. So there's another through line here, is I continually follow the impulse of my intuition during the creative process. And what I got in that moment, and it did feel a little vulnerable and definitely is not like good business acumen, do you know what I mean? To have a conversation with him about it. So I followed that impulse.
Yeah.
Anyway, long
Did he
story.
sign up?
He did.
Great.
I literally raised the price $10,000 in his presence, and he signed up.
Great. Amazing.
So then I had a similar thing happen. A couple of days later, this guy reached out to me, and I was like still fresh in my new pricing. And anyway, I was already, as I was starting to ground into the new pricing, I was already starting to see the next level, but I was honoring where I'm at and not just being like, oh, I should charge even more, right? What happened was, and this is going to full circle will make my point here, is that I went to this next guy, and when I shared with him the price that I had just kind of like landed in and had a little moment with my client, I was like, I can receive that, great. And I was already intuiting the next price. When I went to this other client, he was actually thrown off by how low the price was. And he literally mentioned to me this other next level that I'd already been thinking about. He's like, I thought that's what you were going to say the price was. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying that to say, like, I realize in that example that I am actually already in alignment, and I'm just feeling some trepidation for whatever reason, versus trying to trick myself that I'm into alignment and be overly spiritual and be like, hey, I should just believe, and trying to like anchor myself in something that I'm actually not anchored in.
That's why the Post-it note affirmations world doesn't work.
Yeah.
It really does. It can work. There can be ways that it can be improved upon, but for most people, your Post-it note affirmations are reminders of what you don't believe.
Yeah.
And so every time you read it, you go, I live a life of financial prosperity, and you read that and you don't feel it, you are constantly triggering the part of you that doesn't actually feel it. And so affirmations like that, I've never been a huge believer in them. But I love that you told that story. I want to, with the time that we have left, I would like to go into, so people who have been listening to this conversation have gotten a sense of just the unique approach to creativity and the way that you just view the quantum field. Hopefully everyone knows we've had a very clear definition by now. And so my question for you is, what is on a day-to-day the way that you optimize for creativity? So we haven't gotten too much into it, but you have your own artistry as well as your coaching and your immersions and everything that you do. And you bring this same mindset. That's why I wanted to highlight the mindset, because that's the part that I feel so resonant with. And you bring this mindset to everything that you do, but there's also some tangibles ways where you go, maybe I'm not feeling so creative right now, or maybe I feel disconnected from the quantum in this moment, and I'm not so in my channel. How do you optimize for creativity and to be able to create from the quantum on a very practical kind of day-to-day for you?
Well, this is a mindset too, is I prioritize how I feel. I prioritize my connection to my heart and my connection to my spirit, right? And my connection to my heart would just be sensing how open my heart feels versus contracted or closed. And I make that top priority, and that very much make that type priority in terms of like on a day-to-day basis. You know, if I'm about to go into a meeting, a very practical, tangible example would be if I'm going to sit down and be like, oh, now I'm having a business meeting. I've done this with Chelsea a few times, right?
Your partner.
My partner, yes. My baby boo.
You better say the right words right now. She's listening to
this.
That's
my boo.
You're my queen. My everything.
My queen.
I love you so much.
My wifey for life.
I couldn't do anything without you.
She's my muse. She's my everything.
She's running the teleprompter. You're reading.
Yeah.
Right now.
So we'll go into a meeting, and if I can immediately sense the level of heart connection in me, in her, in us, and the level of connection to truth and the level of connection to spirit. And I prioritize those things. And so if I notice that we start talking about some specifics of these are the line items, the agenda, the things that we need to get done, but we're, on a heart level, we're at a level 4 out of 10. On a connection to spirit, aliveness, vitality, plugged in, we're at a level 3. I'll kind of sense like, okay, we can turn up the volume, turn up the dial. On a heart might just be something simple as like, let's take a moment, a couple of minutes to share how we're feeling, right? To just like with the intention of connecting, because the level of heart connection and the level of connection to spirit is the power that's going to go into whatever it is that we're doing. And so it tangibly is impacting our productivity. And so that's just a tactical example of, in a moment, I'll sense these things and I'll prioritize them. And so now I'm integrating heart and spirit and soul with mind and body. So mind and body would be like, here's the vision. Body would be like the action, the intention for the meeting, like what we're trying to get done, the doing. And so I still prioritize being. And that's an example of going into a meeting. Take it a step back. How I start my day, I'll do my best to connect to spirit, to connect to that clean slate and start my day in the present moment, because that's where all of my power is. Meditation helps that. Sometimes I journal, sometimes I'll go for a walk, and essentially just be in communion and be in that space of just, it's a clean slate, connect with spirit. And this is not always in order, then I'll connect to my heart. And I often connect to that through gratitude, but I like to put gratitude. Gratitude gets activated for me, usually in action. And that it's the difference between saying, I'm grateful for Adam, and reaching out and texting you and saying, I'm really grateful for you, right? And so then activating my heart, and then I'll bring in like mind, and this starts to move into the physical world of like, what's my vision or intention for the day, and start to like, tune into that, and then I'll bring it into the body and then move. So that's
interesting. I like that approach of going into the field first and just being into that blank slate, and then slowly, step by
Exactly.
step, bringing it all the way down into eventually the body of and action.
Right. So then I don't spend the whole day chasing the present moment, right? Or spend time trying to catch up to spirit or try to catch up to my heart. If we start there, then we're starting with so much more of our power. And then I found that I'm exponentially more productive. And so that's become a habit for like from 15 years ago when I heard that quote. I think it's from Abraham Lincoln. If I had an hour to chop down a tree, I'd spend 45 minutes sharpening my axe. I came to see the leverage in my productivity and my effectiveness was so enhanced by feeling connected, being connected to the field, being connected to my heart, that the way I integrated that into my life. So it's not like I'm meditating on a retreat, but now I'm in business. So I'm like, in this world now, is I started designing my life, the flow of my meetings and work in a way that was very integral to that. So that way, then I can kind of, as you say, bringing it down into the body. Then when I bring in like strategy and action, it's being infused with more creative power, more receptivity. Yeah.
To me, what I'm hearing is it's also bringing the feminine energy
Yes.
into this masculine. What am I going to do and get accomplished?
Right. Because the masculine is like ideally kind of fulfilling the oracle or the feminine
100%.
or what's coming
and
through.
learning to listen. And women have this beautiful thing called a moon cycle that allows them to inherently understand their fate. Like, I can't do it today. I just that forced listening. And so many women now in this kind of go strive and grind, boss babe, patriarchal design have stopped listening to that.
100%.
But that cycle is nature's way of informing the feminine. Hey, there are times to go and harvest. There are times to go inward and rest. And I think as men who are so go, to learn that we can go when our feminine energy says now's the time. Act on that we can be infinitely more productive in the few days of action if we listened to that period of inaction and rest and recovery and all the other aspects that are actually happening when it seems like we're not doing anything.
100%. And that applies in business, but we're also describing like art. It's like the creative process. It's like the cycle, masculine and feminine, when the energy is expanding versus when it's time to refine something like that. To me, I see that in my art the same way I do in business. And so my decision making, the way I design my life in business and all these other aspects of my life is very much the same internal process. I have the same approach.
And that is why you're walking the creative path. And so thank you for coming on and sharing that, man. Is there anything left unsaid? Is there anything that you feel at the top of your heart or mind or soul that wants to be expressed to the people listening before we close it out?
I was thinking about this last night about just as much as we are moving passionately towards the things we care about, our visions, our goals, our dreams, our business, our life, our relationships, just also opening to what wants to move through us, right? It's kind of the shift between, life is happening by me and what we're capable of by me, and what becomes possible when we expand and are more available for life to move through us. And that invitation just feels like it's really potent and important right now, to listen deeply and give our decision, our action, our availability to what life wants to move through us, whether you relate to that as God, what God wants to manifest, the universe, or life itself, and just opening up and surrendering to that. Yeah.
Thank you, brother.
That's like feels like co-creating with God, or like, God co-creating our life with us.
Becoming participants in the creation itself.
And creation itself. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for coming and having this conversation with me.
Yeah, man.
And all the people listening and watching, please follow Oren tell them how they can follow you and all the things that you've got going on right now. We'll put it in the show notes too for them.
So Instagram at Oren Harris, ORENHARRIS. My website is orenharris.com. I'm Oren Harris on Facebook. And yeah, I share most of my content on Instagram. I've got exciting things coming up. Relaunching my membership site. That's something that people can find out about through my Instagram bio. And I'm inspired and available, and this is something new that I'm creating right now, to help artists and creatives unleash their creativity. That's one of my newest creative endeavors, is me being a creative director for people like creative entrepreneurs, essentially. And so that's something that people can inquire about, how we can collaborate together and how I can powerfully be of service in that realm.
There it is.
Yeah.
So if you want a quantum creative wizard on your team,
Yes.
hit up Oren Harris. Make sure you follow him online. All the magical things. We'll put links in the show notes. Thank you, Oren, once again for being on here, brother. I love you so much.
Love you too,
diving
man.
deep into these
Yeah,
conversations.
man. This was fun.
And everybody who's been listening, if there's one real takeaway for me from this conversation, it's the real idea that you are on a creative path, whether you're participating in it
right,
or
or
not.
not.
You are creating yourself and your life in every moment. And so be really intentional about it. I know that you're on that path and doing a pretty good job if you're listening to this already. And I hope that it's helpful. If it has been, please share it out with the world. Make sure you tag Oren or myself on social media so we can see what resonated with you, and also reshare your posts. Thank you for listening. I want to remind you that always, in all ways, you are seen, you are heard, and you are loved.
Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you taking the time. If you are interested in building a life that you love through the 3 pillars of relationship, business, and creativity, then I encourage you to continue checking out more of my content, including this video, which I really think that you will like. Would you believe me if I told you that you can make $1 million as a coach with a very small social media following? I know that this is possible because I did it. I was paid $1 million for a 1-year one-on-one coaching contract, and I had less than 5,000 Instagram followers. My name is Adam Roa. I have been a personal development, quote unquote, life coach since 2013. And within 18 months of launching my personal coaching business, I was earning a consistent 6 figures, and that ballooned to 7 figures and beyond, all because I understand that you need 3 things in order to build a successful, and by successful, I mean a lucrative, revenue generating coaching business.